Okay, so this video is going to be based on expansion, which is just another way to say the distributive property, and then factoring, which is pretty much the opposite of distributive property. So we'll start off with expansion and distributive property. So with expansion, you have a number, for instance, and then a quantity inside parentheses. Let's say it's x plus 4. So what you have to do when you have expansion is you multiply your outside number by the first inside term, which should be 3 times x. Then you would do plus. Then you multiply your outside number times your second term. Now, I like to say that the second term is the sign attached to the number. So this would be a positive 4. So it would be 3 times positive 4. So if you do that, 3 times x gives you 3x. Then you have plus 3 times 4, which is 12. And that is the expanded answer. Now, if we take a second example, let's say 2 times the quantity of y minus 3. Now, the expansion rules and distributive property stays the same. They don't change. So you multiply your 2 times your y, which is 2 times y. Then you have, here's the difference. You have a negative 3 inside. So you could say it's y minus 3, but because you're multiplying and distributing, I like to say it's 2 times a negative 3. So based on your tic-tac-toe board, which is here, so your tic-tac-toe board, plus, 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 everything else is minus. So based on your tic-tac-toe board, a positive times a negative is a negative. So 2 times negative 3 would be your second part. 2 times y gives you 2y. 2 times negative 3 gives you negative 6. And you put them together and you get your expanded answer, 2y minus 6. So expansion and distributive property is very important because when it deals with factoring is actually the reverse. So the first example for factoring, let's go 3x plus 12. So you start off with 3x plus 12 inside the parentheses. Now, if you want to look at both terms, we have a 3x and we have a 12. You want to find the greatest common factor, so the biggest number that you could divide evenly into both 3x and 12. So the only number you could divide evenly into 3 would be 3. So your greatest common factor, let's say the GCF, greatest common factor is 3. They don't share an x, so you can't take an x out as well. You can only take a 3 out. So if you take a 3 out, what I mean by that is you're pulling a 3, putting your greatest common factor, and then your parenthesis. So whatever your greatest common factor is, you put outside the parentheses. Now, you just divide each term by your greatest common factor. So 3x divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So you could just write your x inside the parenthesis. A variable by itself has a 1 in front of it. Now you have plus 12 divided by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So your answer is 3 on the outside, then times the quantity of x plus 4. And if you see that 3 times the quantity of x plus 4 is the same as what you started with at the top. So again, factoring is the reverse distributive property. Now, the second example is when you want to factor something completely, the first term has to be positive. So let's take negative 2 y plus 10. So you have negative 2y plus 10. Now, they're both even numbers, so your greatest common factor you could say is 2. But because we want to make the first term positive, a negative, if you divide here, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So it has to be a negative 2 on the outside in order to make that first term inside the parentheses positive. So you divide both of these by negative 2. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 gives you your positive 1. So that's positive 1y. Now, 10 divided by negative 2, a positive divided by a negative gives you a negative. The rules don't change for multiplication and division. So a positive divided by a negative gives you a negative, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that is how you would factor, and that is how you expand. So factoring is the exact opposite of your distributive property.